Chapter 381, Caspian is mine. Willow froze for a moment, wondering why Jin would ask such a question. She suddenly felt that it wasn't a good thing that Jin had come looking for her. That's right, Caspian is my husband. What did you want to talk to me about? Answered Willow with a nod. Heh. Jin suddenly stood up and stared at South Lake City through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her domineering presence as a CEO was unmistakable. Even Willow couldn't help but frown when she looked at Jin. The next moment, Jin walked up to Willow with her arms crossed and declared, Caspian is mine. Everyone present was shocked by the sudden announcement. Both Willow and Ginger looked at Jin with a stunned expression. What did Jin mean by claiming that Caspian belonged to her? Just what was going on? Ginger couldn't believe what she was hearing. The young men from Dord City would have lost their minds if they heard what their dear Jin had just said. Perhaps they would even form a mob and go for Caspian's head. They couldn't possibly handle the fact that their goddess had gone to South Lake City to steal another woman's husband. But then again, the absurdity of such news wouldn't be easily believed. Ginger didn't dare to spread the news about what was happening right now, as she was afraid that Jin might not let her get away with it. Willow was flabbergasted by the fact that the princess of the Morrison family from Dord City was trying to steal her husband. What are you talking about? Caspian is my husband. What does he have to do with you? Asked Willow. What a strange woman. Indeed. She barged into Willow's office and declared that Caspian belonged to her. Willow's question angered Jin. Listen closely. Willow, Caspian belongs to me. We went through a lot during our time in the military, and he even saved my life. Caspian and I would have been married if not for you. Jin couldn't believe that the man of her dreams had to suffer from disrespect after marrying into the Stewart family. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Her crush had just turned into a matrilocal son, law to the Stewarts. Jin's reply only caused Willow's head to spin. Caspian had never told her about anything like this. She began to wonder just how much had Caspian been hiding from her. The couple had already gone through so many obstacles together, and now a new one popped up in the form of Jin. What if there was even more to come? Willow started overthinking about various scenarios. But she ultimately still trusted Caspian more than anything as he was her husband. Just what are you talking about? I'd like you to leave right away, or I'll be calling for security, declared Willow. She was afraid that Jin might continue to spew out unnecessary nonsense. Jin, however, stepped up and stared at Willow without any intention to leave. If you're willing to give me Caspian, I'm willing to give you all of Morrison Group's assets. Her words shocked everyone present once more. Jin was actually willing to transfer hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets to Willow in exchange for Caspian alone. Morrison Group was a dominant player in various industries within Dord City. It was considered one of the strongest corporations within Diatoran itself. Jin, however, was willing to offer all of it just to exchange for somebody else's husband. Just what kind of secrets and charm did Caspian have for Jin to be so head over heels for him? Ginger was dumbfounded, as it was her first time seeing Jin losing all sense of reason. Throughout all the years by her side, she had no idea what Jin was thinking at that moment. It would shake up Dord City as a whole if this conversation was made known to the public. Willow, too, had frozen in place. She never expected Caspian to be so important to Jin. Jin was willing to give up billions worth of assets in exchange for him alone. Just what had happened between Caspian and Jin back then? Willow could only wonder about the secrets Caspian never bothered to tell her. She was suddenly at a loss for words as she bit down on her lip. Caspian's identity had always been a mystery to her. Just what else could he be hiding from his wife? Noticing Willow's silence, Jin continued, Have you decided yet? I heard that you used to be a small business owner who happened to become the CEO of South Lake Corporation by chance. Well, you can give Caspian up to me, and I'll give you assets worth billions. It would propel your South Lake Corporation into the biggest corporation within the entirety of Diatoran. What's there to even think about for a deal like this? A grin crept up on Jin's face. There was no one who would possibly reject her gracious offer. She assumed that Caspian and Willow's marriage was a problem that money could solve. Willow sighed as she replied, So this is what an offer from the Morrison family of Dord City looks like. It truly is enticing. Jin smiled. Then divorce already. She would regain her chance with Caspian so long as he returned to being single. In her eyes, Caspian was worth more than the entirety of Morrison Group. Caspian was everything to Jin, and she would willingly sacrifice her position and all her belongings just to be with him. She wanted Caspian for herself, and nothing else mattered. Willow stared at Jin's smug face and changed her tone. Your offer is enticing, indeed, but unfortunately, Caspian is my husband, and I won't give him up for anything. I can't be without Caspian, and he can't be without me. We're everything to each other. She began to tear up as she spoke. Willow covered her face as she started sobbing. It was at this moment that Willow realized just how much Caspian mattered to her. Caspian had protected her as the couple went through all sorts of challenges. One time, he even willingly stepped into danger alone just to rescue her. Willow couldn't let go of such a great man. She felt that her life would lose all meaning if Caspian were to leave her side. Just thinking about losing Caspian made Willow feel as if her blood was being drained out of her body. What did you say? Jin had completely frozen up. She couldn't believe that Willow had actually rejected her offer. She could only wonder if the relationship between Caspian and Willow was deeper than she had thought. However, Jin wouldn't easily give up on Caspian. She would attain the man of her dreams one way or another. Very well. Since you've refused my offer, then please don't blame me for being ruthless for what I'll have to do. I'll show you the gap between you and me. Jin turned around and left after delivering her declaration. Ginger was stunned by the whole ordeal as she wondered just who Caspian was for Jin to willingly offer up everything she had in exchange for just one man. Chapter 382 Heartless. Willow looked at Jin and strengthened her resolve. She realized she had to improve herself in order to keep Caspian by her side, and to stand proudly before all who had doubted her in her life. She made a promise to herself to never ever leave Caspian's side nor to give him away. Willow had been assuming that her marriage with Caspian was going strong until Jin's appearance convinced her otherwise. Jin's expression remained cold as she left the office building of Southlake Corporation. Ginger followed up behind her and sheepishly asked, "What should we do next, Ms. Morrison?" Jin remained silent for a while, and Ginger didn't try to ask again. "To Riverside Villa," said Jin. She then got into a limited edition Bentley. 30 minutes later, Jin and Ginger arrived in front of Riverside Villa. Caspian was about to leave the house and was stunned when he saw multiple cars parked in front of the house. An enchanting figure soon got out of the Bentley. Jin smiled, and her heart went aflutter the moment she saw Caspian. Caspian! Caspian was surprised to see her. "Jin, why are you here?" She rushed over to Caspian and complained, "Have you forgotten our promise, Caspian? I've waited for you for so many years. I can't believe you married Willow instead. Why are you doing this to me, Caspian?" Jin finally let out her bottled-up emotions all at once. She began to sob after finishing her words. Ginger frowned as she watched the scene unfold by the side. She couldn't imagine just what could have happened between Jin and Caspian in the past. However, she didn't dare to ask any questions despite her confusion, as she was just a mere secretary. Ginger scanned Caspian from head to toe with contempt. She could only wonder why Jin was so obsessed with a man like Caspian. There were plenty of better men back in Dord City who had been trying to court Jin. Caspian looked helpless as he replied, "Jin, we don't really have anything going on between us. Besides, it's been so many years since. Why can't you just let it go?" Jin suddenly grabbed Caspian's hand and shouted,
"Caspian, I don't really care even if you're married now."
"I just want to be together with you. I'd do anything for it to happen. I'll even give you the entire Morrison Group. Please, Caspian, let us be together. Let's get married and have kids." Her tone seemed almost as if she was pleading for help. She was willing to give up everything she had now in order to be with Caspian. Caspian let out a sigh as he retracted his hand. "That's enough, Jin. I'm happily married to my wife right now. Please leave and stop bothering us. My wife will be upset if she ever hears about this," replied Caspian. He only loved Willow. Jin was also quite the beautiful woman with a fantastic figure, but it didn't matter. Willow wasn't any worse compared to Jin. But most importantly, the couple had already gone through a lot together. Caspian had promised himself that he could never betray Willow. Jin froze in place as she didn't expect the man of her dreams to be so heartless. She had traveled thousands of miles to come to Southlake City, only to be driven away by him. "Caspian, you asshole! Have you already forgotten what happened back when we were in the military? You rescued me from the enemy, remember? I promised that I'd marry you once I was discharged from the army, wailed Jin. She was so distraught that she no longer resembled the great Ms. Morrison. She had wanted to be with Caspian ever since he saved her life. She had always fantasized about starting a family with Caspian after they were discharged. But everything changed by the time she was discharged. Caspian was nowhere to be found, and all she could do was patiently wait for his reappearance. Jin had always kept a lookout for Caspian throughout her time developing Morrison Group. A few years had passed before she finally managed to find Caspian again. But Caspian was already married. Caspian wiped away the tears on Jin's face and explained, "We were just youngsters back then, Lin. And besides, anyone would have tried to save you. You really don't have to be so grateful toward me, and you don't have to marry me either. It's time to let it go, Jin. I'm sure you can find better men than me with your current status." Caspian turned around and left after finishing his words. He had to be decisive against such matters. He wouldn't do anything that would betray Willow. Jin suddenly knelt down before Caspian with a thud. The great Ms. Morrison from Dord City had knelt down just like that. Jin proceeded to hold on to Caspian's leg as she wailed, "Caspian, please, I can't go on without you. I'm only so successful because I worked hard as I held on to the hope that I might be able to find you and marry you. How am I supposed to continue living if you leave me? You're the only one in my heart, Caspian. I love you." Jin sobbed loudly as her heart was filled with despair. The man of her dreams who she had cherished for so long was going to leave her. She felt as if her heart had been stabbed by multiple daggers. Ginger had never seen such a side of Jin. She had always seen Jin as someone she strived to become. But now, Jin would stoop so low just to try and keep a man by her side. Jin no longer resembled a powerful CEO, nor did she resemble the calm and collected beautiful woman she was known for. She had discarded all of her dignity for love. Ginger angrily stared at Caspian for causing Jin to turn into such a mess. Passerbys nearby were also surprised to find a beauty like Jin being so distraught. It seemed unbelievable for such a beauty to also fail at the quest for love. Caspian lifted Jin off the ground and explained, "Please stand up, Jin. I've always treated you as my sister, and we can always stay in contact with each other as friends. I just can't be with you as husband and wife." Caspian was only 19 years old when he first met Jin. Although he had feelings for her back then, he had also grown up and matured alongside the countless battles he had gone through. And now, Caspian was married. He couldn't possibly reciprocate Jin's feelings. "I don't care. I want to marry you. I want to be your one and only woman." Jin hugged Caspian and kissed him. Caspian was startled and became angry. He had allowed Jin to vent her emotions, but he never allowed her to disrespect him like this. Chapter 383, returning with an empty hand. Caspian pushed Jin away at once. Jin seemed to be shocked by her own actions as well. Noticing that Caspian was leaving, she had only thought about having him stay. Caspian explained, "Jin, I'm only saying this one last time. I'm already married, so please respect me and yourself. What if Willow sees this? How am I supposed to explain to her? Besides, it's not good for your image if it gets out to the public." Caspian couldn't believe that Jin would kiss him out in public. It would be troublesome if Willow learned about this. Jin had assumed that Caspian hated the kiss for being too impulsive, but to her surprise, it was only because he was worried about Willow's feelings. The realization made her furious. "I've already gone to South Lake Corporation and met Willow earlier. She isn't as beautiful as I am, and her figure isn't as great as mine. She's not worthy enough to be your wife. I am." "Divorce her already, Caspian," shouted Jin. Caspian frowned as his expression sank. "What? You've already met with Willow?" He stared daggers into Jin, as if he wanted to eat her alive. Jin was startled when she saw Caspian's gaze. She was at a loss for words as she was terrified by Caspian's sudden shift in emotion. She could tell that Caspian was genuinely angry. "Protect Ms. Morrison." Ginger noticed Caspian's anger and shouted for help. She was surprised that Caspian could scare someone with just his gaze alone. She felt that it was necessary to teach him a lesson for disrespecting Jin. Dozens of bodyguards soon rushed over. "Get lost!" shouted Caspian. The bodyguards were all terrified by the shout and stood frozen in place. Ginger decided to take the matter into her own hands and rushed forward. "You bastard! You dare to bully Ms. Morrison?" She began to punch and kick Caspian. Caspian was visibly annoyed by the blows. A crisp sound rang out as Caspian raised his hand to slap her. Ginger was stunned as she felt that she had been immensely disrespected by Caspian. "You good for nothing. You dare hit me," shouted Ginger. She raised her hand once more and rushed toward Caspian. Caspian's expression sank as he realized that Ginger was coming back for more. He slapped her once more without any hesitation. But this time, he didn't hold back. Ginger was knocked to the ground as a result. She looked back at Caspian with resentment, as she had never experienced being disrespected like so throughout her life. Ginger was treated with nothing but respect ever since she became Jin's secretary. Even the young heirs of powerful families would treat her like one of their own. She eventually grew arrogant and no longer treated other men below her with decency like she used to. But now, she was just slapped by a lowly matrilocal son-in-law. Ginger was furious, but she didn't dare to say much about it. She was afraid that Caspian might slap her again if she tried to voice her opinion. Caspian glanced at her once more before deciding to ignore her. Meanwhile, Jin was still frozen in place. She never expected Caspian to be so powerful. Dozens of bodyguards were frozen from fear and couldn't move a muscle. And her own secretary was just slapped twice. Jin was visibly upset, but Caspian remained indifferent. He wouldn't tolerate anyone for bullying Willow. Not even a friend like Jin. "Stop messing around. Lin, you can look for me if you need anything, but never bother Willow. Get it? Willow is my wife. I'm letting you go this time. But don't blame me for being ruthless if you do it again," declared Caspian as he turned to leave. Jin began to cry aloud as she watched Caspian leave. She felt as if she had lost the most important thing in her life. She couldn't wait for Caspian any longer. Why? Why did Caspian choose Willow over me? It's all her fault that Caspian abandoned me. I will never forgive her, shouted Jin with all her strength. Jin calmed down after a few minutes and said, "Let's go." Ginger nodded her head without hesitation. Jin then turned toward the bodyguards. "Get lost. All of you, you're useless." The bodyguards were dumbfounded as they quickly understood what she meant. They were about to lose their job now that Jin had told them to get lost. Their performance earlier was disappointing, after all. The two women got back into the car, and Ginger asked worriedly, "Are you heading back now, Miss Morrison? Caspian's such a rude asshole to be dismissing you like this." Jin glanced at her and replied, "Who said you could badmouth Caspian like that? Slap yourself." Ginger immediately slapped herself on the cheek without a single second of delay. She hated Caspian more than anything else at this moment. She couldn't believe that Jin would still defend him. Jin coldly declared, "We're going home." She had finally reverted back to her usual calm and collected demeanor. Meanwhile, Caspian walked into the CEO's office of Southlake Corporation to find Willow busy with work. Willow smiled when she saw Caspian coming in. "When did you get here, hubby?" She then handed over some documents to him. "Look, this is the plan for the further development of Southlake Corporation." "You're heading north?" asked Caspian. Willow nodded her head. "That's right. Now that the company has already gained a foothold in the south, I'm thinking of expanding up north. We never had a presence in Dord City, even though it's the largest economic region of Diatoran. If Southlake Corporation wants to grow stronger, it's only a matter of time before we expand toward there." Now that Southlake Corporation had already established their presence in South Diatoran, their next step was to expand north. Caspian had a complicated look on his face. He knew that Willow made such a decision not just because she wanted to expand her business, but also partly because of Jin. Morrison Group, which was under Jin's leadership, was the major player in the northern parts of Diatoran. If Southlake Corporation wanted to expand north, Willow would surely come into collision with Jin. A fight would eventually happen between the two of them. Willow had complete confidence in herself in this matter. Caspian hugged her and asked, "Are you doing this because of Jin?" Willow lowered her head as she replied, "You already know about her?" "Yeah, Jin visited me back at the Ho. Use." Willow was visibly nay. Caspian already knew what she was worried about as he reached out to pinch her cheeks. "Relax, I'm your husband. I won't be snatched away by anyone. I'd want to be with you for the rest of our lives." Willow began to tear up as she listened to his reassuring words. Chapter 384 Morrison Group makes a move. Willow was genuinely concerned when she heard that Jin had already visited Caspian. She was worried that Caspian would abandon her. Jin's beauty, confidence, and overall excellence weren't something Willow could deny. I'm worried that someone as successful as Jin might snatch you away, Caspian. Caspian smiled and replied, "Well, do you see how sought after I am now? I still remember how much you disliked me back then. You'd better look after me properly so that I don't get snatched away by some other woman." Willow smiled in response. "You're a meanie." She could tell that Caspian genuinely loved her very much. She hugged him tightly. "Don't worry, Caspian. I'll strive to become better and better so that I can become the wife you deserve. I won't let anyone snatch you away from me." She then looked up at Caspian and went in for a kiss. Morrison Group, located in Morrison Tower in Dord City, had tens of thousands of employees. Every single one of them prided themselves on being part of Morrison Group. The group was involved in more than a dozen industries within Dord City. The very first thing Jin did once she returned to office was to hold a high-level meeting. Every single elite within the meeting room didn't dare to look straight at her. Jin was seemingly a cold and distant person at this moment. Looking at everyone present, she declared, "I need all of you to rescind all your current work at hand and think about how to deal with South Lake Corporation. You have 10 days, starting from today, to collapse South Lake Corporation. Afterward, Morrison Group will take over all of their business in South Lake City." Jin wanted to completely eradicate South Lake Corporation and to have Willow beg her for forgiveness. Once Willow was removed from the equation, Caspian would surely return to her side. She wanted to show Willow the gap between the two of them. She wanted to make Caspian regret ever choosing Willow as his wife. South Lake Corporation? What company is that? Doesn't sound like a very powerful corporation to me. How big could a corporation from a small city like South Lake City be? The elites inside the meeting room whispered with each other. They had never heard of South Lake Corporation before this. Jin turned to Ginger and continued, "These are some relevant documents about South Lake Corporation. Have a read." "Yes, madam." Ginger nodded her head and distributed the stack of documents to everyone in the meeting room. They flipped through the documents with a smile, thinking that Jin may have overestimated her opponent. South Lake Corporation was not yet a listed company and only had tens of billions in assets. They felt that it was overkill for Jin to order them to put down everything on hand just to deal with South Lake Corporation. Dealing with South Lake Corporation would be a breeze for a powerhouse like Morrison Group. Jin's expression sank as she realized that everyone seemed to be taking the matter lightly. "Are you doubting my decision?" They were all startled by her question as they lowered their heads and remained silent. Jin had absolute say in the group as the CEO. No higher-ups in the company could possibly go against her decision. Judging from Morrison Group's development over the past few years, every decision Jin had made had been the correct move. But everyone was still puzzled as to why she would spend so much resources just dealing with a small opponent like South Lake Corporation. Jin explained, "I'm sure you're all thinking that I'm making a big deal out of South Lake Corporation. But I need you to pay attention to the fact that they conquered the southern part of Diatoran within just a few months. It'll only be a matter of time before their value skyrockets." The crowd was surprised as they realized how powerful South Lake Corporation really was. Such momentum was akin to Morrison Group back then. Jin continued, "South Lake Corporation has already managed to conquer Naporia, Easton, and even Sealand's market. They've already dabbled in almost half of every business within Diatoran. At this pace, they could even overtake us in 2 years. Do you still think they're a small fry? Besides, they'll eventually expand up north to face us head-on." The crowd was startled once more. South Lake Corporation's fast-paced growth struck fear into their hearts. They were an opponent they had never seen before. The corporation's current pace seemed as if they would soon monopolize the entire South Diatoran. When they eventually expanded up north, South Lake Corporation would also become their enemy. It was no wonder that Jin was taking this so seriously. Everyone turned serious. "What should we do next, Ms. Morrison? We can't delay any further. We need to deal with them right away." Everyone present in the meeting room came to an agreement. Jin nodded her head in satisfaction. "I hereby declare that we'll dedicate all our energy to deal with South Lake Corporation." Dismissed. Everyone present in the meeting room shouted in unison, "Yes, Ms. Morrison." They immediately went to work after the meeting was over. Jin stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and enjoyed Dord City's scenery as she muttered to herself, "You made me do this, Willow." Caspian will be mine sooner or later. You'll regret ever crossing me, and you'll divorce Caspian right away. Dord City soon received news that Morrison Group would be actively suppressing any companies coming in from out of the city. Nearby cities surrounding Dord City were puzzled by Morrison Group's behavior. However, they were all startled when they learned about Southlake City's expansion. Southlake Corporation's development was too rapid. They conquered South Diatoran within just a few months. They would soon become a new business empire at such a pace. The business world was about to go through massive change, and everyone was looking forward to seeing who would be more powerful between Morrison Group and Southlake Corporation. Meanwhile, Southlake City had already begun their expansion into the northern parts of Diatoran, seemingly going against Morrison Group. Back in Southlake Corporation's meeting room, everyone present had very ugly expressions. They were all under immense stress after receiving blows from Morrison Group. Miss Stewart, companies from the northern part of Diatoran have terminated their contracts with us. Miss Stewart, distributors from the north of Diatoran have terminated their contracts. Miss Stewart, even the advertisement partners in the north have terminated their contracts. Bad news flowed into the meeting room, one after another. Companies that had already been in partnership with Southlake Corporation suddenly terminated their contracts all at once. The smaller companies soon started to take sides. A war between two business conglomerates was sometimes more terrifying than actual wars. Standing on the wrong side of the battlefield would mean losing everything. The majority of companies chose to side with Morrison Group. Southlake Corporation's current scale wasn't yet comparable to Morrison Group. Willow remained calm while she listened to the reports, as she had already anticipated such an outcome. Just let them pay us back for the breach of contract. Besides, I have a very important decision to make, shouted Willow. Chapter 385 Counter Attack. Everyone stared at Willow while holding their breath. Morrison Group wishes to stop us from expanding after all we've done to reach where we are now. I'm sure everyone already knows how much we've sacrificed for our company's growth, so we can't afford to be stopped by our opponent here, declared Willow. Speak your mind, Miss Stewart. We'll always follow your instructions. That's right. We won't be easy prey for Morrison Group. The higher-ups were all fired up. They had been around and witnessed Southlake Corporation's growth to their current state, especially during the time when Willow became CEO and business skyrocketed. They were naturally angry when Morrison Group appeared to put a halt to their progress. From now on, I need all of you to work harder. Try and take turns to work overtime. We need to stand firm against our opponent and expand into the north. Everyone stood up and solemnly replied, "Yes, madam." No one dared to slack off now that Southlake Corporation was facing a crisis that could potentially affect their own lives. Don't worry, we have a new product that will surely dominate the market up north. Believe in us, and believe in yourselves, said Willow. The crowd's unprecedented pressure was slightly alleviated with Willow's words. It would seem that the CEO had plans of her own. Suddenly, Caspian walked into the meeting room. Everyone looked toward Caspian as he entered. Rumors about Caspian's hidden strength were rampant around Southlake City. It was rumored that the Massey family's collapse was directly related to Caspian. Everyone was curious about why Caspian had appeared at this moment. It seems that my wife has forgotten about something. If Southlake Corporation manages to stabilize themselves in the north, everyone here will receive a bonus of $100 million each, said Caspian. The higher-ups all looked at each other in surprise. There were around 20 higher-ups at the meeting, and $100 million each would amount to quite a huge sum. Caspian continued, if we can manage to beat Morrison Group, we'll allocate another $1.5 billion in bonus. Some of the higher-ups were so shocked that they almost fell off their chairs. It was too generous for a bonus. Thank you, Ms. Stewart. We won't disappoint you. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. We swear to win this war for Miss Stewart. The higher-ups offered their words of gratitude one after another. Money was a very powerful tool to incentivize and encourage people to work hard. Caspian nodded his head with satisfaction as he scanned through the motivated employees in the room. It would be safe to say that they would not be slacking off in the near future. Meanwhile, Willow remained in her seat with a look of confusion. She felt uneasy as her earlier speech was made in order to motivate her employees. But it was obviously not as effective as Caspian's speech. But then again, a few billion to be issued as a bonus wasn't a lot for Southlake Corporation. As long as the company could penetrate the northern market, The profit would be beyond mere billions. It may well be tens of, if not hundreds, of billions of dollars. Everyone immediately returned to their workstations and started working. Back in the CEO's office, Caspian and Willow were enjoying each other's company. You should discuss with me before you say something so outrageous next time. If it's too sudden, it'll make me look bad. I'm supposed to be the CEO here, complained Willow. Caspian's sudden announcement was too much, and Willow couldn't even react in time. Even though it was quite an effective declaration, Willow still hoped that Caspian would discuss things with her before making such decisions. I understand, honey. I won't do it again. I'll make sure to tell you everything, replied Caspian. Really? Then, what's the deal with Jin? She came here all the way from Dord City just to look for you. I didn't even know you had such a good friend from the military. I reckon she has a different type of relationship with you compared to Sylvia, right? Jin had already become a thorn in Willow's side. Willow felt that a married couple should be honest and shouldn't hold any secrets against each other. Caspian was her one and only husband. She trusted him with everything about herself. Caspian, however, seemed to be keeping many secrets to himself. Willow couldn't help but feel aggrieved about that. Caspian felt embarrassed and was at a loss for words. He actually had nothing going on with Jin, but Willow seemed to be extremely concerned about the matter. There must be something between the two of you, so just tell me about it. She would feel bad for the rest of her life if she didn't figure it out. It's a long story. Caspian hugged Willow tightly and started recalling his days back in the military. I used to be a squad leader, and it all happened during a joint exercise back then. It was just the usual exercise in the forest, and no one was really worried about their safety. That was until some criminals came out of hiding and kidnapped a few of our female soldiers. Jin was one of them. I led my team to track down the criminals and rescue the kidnapped soldiers. And from that point on, Jin. He roughly described what happened back then. In his opinion, rescuing Jin was just the right thing to do. Anyone would have done the same. Besides, Jin wasn't the only one who was rescued back then. But she had latched onto him ever since that day. She expressed her interest in Caspian and began her efforts to court him. So that's how it is. And here I thought something bad had happened between the two of you. Jin sure is shameless to pester you like this. Willow believed Caspian's words. Then again, his actions spoke louder than words. Suddenly, Caspian's phone started ringing. Hello? Lincoln's voice sounded extremely urgent. Bad news, Mr. Lynch. Someone who claims to be from Dord City's TMAA is looking for you. TMAA? Just tell him I'm not interested, replied Caspian impatiently. He wasn't free to just meet up with any random stranger. Right as Caspian was about to hang up, Lincoln said, Mr. Lynch, this man's very strong. Our men were all defeated. An impatient voice suddenly interrupted Lincoln. Get lost. So you're Caspian. You have half an hour to appear in front of me, or I'll kill all your men. The stranger immediately hung up. Caspian frowned as he wondered what kind of hooligan dared to find trouble with him. It would seem that Lincoln was in trouble. What happened, hubby? Asked Willow. Caspian smiled. It's nothing. Don't worry. I'm going to fix some problems, that's all. All right. Willow nodded her head as she unconditionally trusted him. Caspian kissed Willow on her forehead. Just focus on your work, okay? I'll always be supporting you. He never really saw Morrison Group as a threat, as he could have them disappear from Dord City in an instant if he wanted. Chapter 386 Traditional Martial Arts Association. Caspian smiled. Do your best, darling. His words held a lot of weight behind them. If he ever revealed his true identity, Morrison Group wouldn't stand a chance against him. He could have the group disappear overnight from Dord City if he ever wanted to. But Caspian would never do something like that. He may be the Diateranian god of war, but he wasn't a man who would abuse his power. The current crisis for Southlake Corporation would also serve as a challenge for Willow. If he were to solve all her problems for her, Willow would never be able to grow stronger. Even if Southlake Corporation were to collapse, it wouldn't really be a problem for Caspian. Tens of billions of dollars of assets were nothing to Caspian. He could establish countless more corporations with a wave of his hand. Willow was emotional. Thank you so much, hubby. She felt that she had nothing to worry about with Caspian unconditionally supporting her from the back. It showed that Caspian trusted her with everything. She stared at Caspian's back as he left. She was charmed and couldn't lay her eyes off of him. Caspian then drove to Zot Manor. He wanted to find out who it was who dared to cause trouble in South Lake City. Meanwhile, Zot Manor was in chaos. Hundreds of bodyguards had collapsed to the ground. Lincoln, formerly the richest man in the Two Lakes area, was currently being stepped on by an old man wearing long blue robes. The old man declared, "I'll kill you if Caspian is late." Lincoln was startled as he realized that the old man wasn't kidding about killing him. The old man seemed relatively calm and didn't take Lincoln seriously. He didn't even use a fraction of his power to deal with the people here. It seemed as if the leader of the South Alliance of Diatoran wasn't as strong as he expected. He felt that the current mission would be easily accomplished. Lincoln gritted his teeth with anger. "You're dead as soon as Mr. Lynch arrives," the old man responded with a slap on his face. "Shut your mouth. Caspian is nothing but a useless scaredy cat. I'll rip him to pieces once he appears," declared the old man. Who's ripping who to pieces? What an arrogant old man. Let's see if you have what it takes to back up your words. Caspian had finally rushed over to help. Noticing Caspian's appearance, Lincoln begged for help. "Mr. Lynch," the old man kicked hard at Lincoln. "You're too noisy." Lincoln was sent rolling across the floor and stopped right at Caspian's feet. Caspian seemed calm even though he was genuinely furious. He felt that the old man wasn't taking him seriously. The old man scanned Caspian from head to toe and asked, "So, you're Caspian?" "I am. And you are?" "Why are you here to cause trouble?" asked Caspian. "My name's Horace Moore, and I'm an elder of the Traditional Martial Arts Association, known as the TMAA, announced the old man. Caspian frowned as he shook his head. "What the hell is the TMAA? I've never heard of such a lousy organization." Horace was furious. "You brat? Do you want to die?" An elder of the TMAA was seen as nothing but a hooligan in Caspian's eyes. Caspian turned impatient. "Enough nonsense. Just tell me what you're here for." He wasn't in the mood for idle chatter with people like Horace. Horace smugly answered, "I'm sent here by the chairman of the TMAA to send you a message. From today onward, you're no longer the leader of the Alliance of the South of Diatoran. You're also told to go and personally apologize to the chairman in Dord City." Caspian simply smiled with contempt. "Who the fuck is he? And what does this have anything to do with me? And why would I apologize?" The chairman of the TMAA must have lost his mind to be demanding for Caspian's apology. No one within Diatoran would dare to demand an apology from Caspian. Even the king himself treated Caspian with respect. Horace's expression was distorted with anger. He'd expected Caspian to beg for forgiveness the moment he announced his affiliation with the TMAA. Caspian, however, wasn't the slightest bit intimidated by the TMAA as he insulted the organization right in front of Horace. Horace wanted to punish Caspian right then and there for his insolence, even though he was assigned to bring Caspian back to the TMAA alive. Horace angrily shouted, "This is a warning, Caspian. The entirety of Diatoran will soon be under the TMAA's rule. You're nothing but a silly little leader of the Alliance in the South, and you dare disrespect us. The chairman will have you gone with a wave of his hand." The appearance of the Southern Alliance was considered disrespectful by the TMAA. If anyone was allowed to claim themselves as the leader of an alliance, what would be the need for the TMAA? "What the fuck is the TMAA?" asked Caspian impatiently. A mere little organization dared to offend him. "This TMAA of yours sounds like a bunch of rabble to me. Go back and tell your chairman that he won't be taking off my title as the leader of the alliance. And I sure as hell won't be apologizing either. Why don't you have your chairman come to me instead?" "I'll beat the hell out of him," shouted Caspian. Horace was enraged by Caspian's words. What arrogance! He realized he had to teach Caspian a lesson right then and there. Horace's expression sank as he launched a powerful blow right at Caspian's face. Caspian realized that Horace was an innate grandmaster, which was most likely the reason why he dared to cause trouble alone. Horace must have assumed that he could do as he wished in South Lake City as an innate grandmaster. Caspian smiled as he returned Horace's attack with a blow of his own. The two of them violently collided with each other. A powerful shockwave emanated from the collision of their fists. Lincoln watched in awe as it was a rare occasion to witness a clash between two powerful fighters. Horace's confident demeanor disappeared in an instant. The next moment, Caspian's fist slammed directly onto his chest. Horace saw that Caspian had only thrown a single punch. but his body clearly felt that he had received a barrage of blows. The intense pain bubbling within his body was too much for him to bear. He was sent flying backward like a cannonball until he crashed into a wall. A huge crater appeared from the impact, and Horace's body lay in the center of it. Caspian was unamused by the innate grandmaster whom he had defeated in an instant. Horace was in disbelief as he crawled out from the crater. He looked like an unkempt senior as blood flowed out from the corners of his mouth. Who are you? Horace was shocked as he wasn't supposed to run into trouble in South Lake City with his abilities. He had assumed that dealing with Caspian would be a breeze. His assumption had completely shifted now that he was defeated in a few mere seconds. Chapter 387, The Eldorian Scroll. Horace couldn't gauge Caspian's true strength even though he himself was an innate grandmaster. It was obvious that Caspian's strength far outmatched his. Go back and tell your chairman that no one has the right to take away my title as the alliance leader. He may challenge me if he wants. I'm very interested in the position of chairman as well, declared Caspian. Horace froze up as he imagined how furious the chairman would be once he listened to Caspian's words. No one had ever dared to offend the TMAA back in Dord City. Even the prestigious families within Dord City treated the chairman with the utmost respect. Caspian was too arrogant. Horace promised that he would be back to humiliate Caspian after he returned home to pass on the message. Very well. I'll pass on your message to the chairman. You'd better not regret it later. Get lost! Any more words and I'll kill you, answered Caspian impatiently. Horace was angry, but he also trembled in fear. He had seen his fair share of arrogant men, but none had been as arrogant as Caspian. He snorted as he got up from the floor and left Zot Manor. He knew that he was outmatched, and that he might end up dead if he stayed any longer. Horace wasn't stupid enough to not grasp the given chance to escape. Caspian stood still as he watched Horace leave. He was too lazy to bother with losers like Horace. He then turned to Lincoln and asked, "Are you all right?" Lincoln struggled to stand up. "Thank you, Mr. Lynch. I'm all right now, but I might have been dead if not for you." Even though Horace was nothing compared to Caspian, he was an opponent too powerful for Lincoln to deal with. "I've already called an ambulance for you. You did a good job. I'll assign the best doctor to treat your wounds," said Caspian. Lincoln had surprisingly held his own. He may have had bodyguards, but he wasn't a trained fighter himself. "You're too kind, Mr. Lynch. I only did what I should," answered Lincoln. Caspian patted Lincoln on the shoulder. "I can't believe there really are hooligans who come to South Lake City just to cause trouble. All right, I'll still need your help once you've recovered. You're tasked with maintaining the safety of South Lake City. Go and find Sylvia. She'll provide you with any manpower or funds that you'll need. Ordinary men wouldn't possibly be able to deal with an innate grandmaster like Horace." Lincoln replied, "Yes, sir. I won't let you down. But, Mr. Lynch, how powerful is that TMAA in Dord City? I'm sure they'll come back for more." "The TMAA is just a bunch of hooligans. I'll show them hell if they ever try to come back to cause trouble," answered Caspian with contempt. Caspian had yet to see anything that he feared within Diatoran. He had heard about the TMAA. He would have been fine with their existence if they had done good for society. But all they ever did was gather up criminals and hooligans into one giant organization that was up to no good. Lincoln looked up at the confident man and admired him from the bottom of his heart. Caspian then left Zot Manor and returned home. Sylvia rushed over to greet him as soon as he returned home. "I finished investigating the TMAA, Caspian." Caspian had assigned Sylvia to investigate the TMAA through a phone call while en route back home. He came to realize why Balthazar had established the investigative team. There were far too many factions operating within Diatoran that he had never known about due to being at war in the South Aridlands. The TMAA was established over 100 years ago. They've always been deeply rooted within the inner workings of Diatoran. The majority of trained fighters would choose to join the TMAA all throughout history, and their power and authority slowly but surely grew. "I think you may have offended them when you became the leader of the alliance in Naporia," reported Sylvia. She then looked at Caspian with concern and continued, "Caspian, I believe the TMAA won't let you off the hook easily now that they've appeared out of nowhere. Horace was simply just an officer, and I heard that the chairman, Ace Garland, is very powerful. Be careful, Caspian." Sylvia knew the limits of her own strength. She also reminded herself of the fact that the TMAA might pose a threat. But then again, anyone causing trouble would be met with Caspian's wrath. "Very well. You may go," replied Caspian. Caspian fell into deep thought after Sylvia left the house. The king had granted him absolute power and authority to do anything he wanted. Now that evil forces had emerged within Diatoran, causing harm to the citizens, Caspian wouldn't tolerate their existence any further. It was the next day at the TMAA headquarters in Dord City. Horace knelt down on the floor and reported, "Mr. Garland, Caspian, that arrogant bastard, beat me up and treated you and the TMAA like nothing. This is clearly a challenge. We can't let him get away with this. He even said that once he's done with you, he'll use your skull as an ashtray." He hated Caspian more than anything else at this moment. At the center of the hall was a middle-aged man sitting on top of a golden throne. He looked down on Horace with contempt. "Nixon!" shouted Ace. An old man dressed in a black robe appeared and greeted him. "Yes, Mr. Garland?" Horace's face lit up with joy the moment he saw Nixon. Nixon Xenos was the head elder of the TMAA. He was only one step below Ace in strength. With Nixon stepping into the fray, Caspian would surely meet his end. "How is the progress for the task I've assigned you?" asked Ace. "I've already finished my investigation, Mr. Garland. The Eldorian scroll fragment is within the Stewart family's possession," answered Nixon. Horace froze up at the mere mention of the Eldorian scroll. He finally realized the reason why Ace had sent him to South Lake City. It was for none other than the Eldorian scroll. The Eldorian scroll contained knowledge about ancient yet profound martial arts mastery. The scroll itself also contained secrets within its illustrations. The problem was that the Eldorian scroll had been separated into 9 fragments, and even finding one alone was an arduous task. News about the location of one fragment alone could send the entirety of Diatoran into a wave of frenzy. Horace's expression sank as he thought about how no fighter throughout history had resisted the temptation of obtaining the Eldorian scroll. He began to tremble with fear as he was worried that Ace might punish him for his failure. "Nixon, I hereby allocate you 5,000 of our elites. I need you to march to South Lake City under the pretense of eliminating Caspian while locating the Eldorian scroll fragment. Remember, you will still have to eliminate Caspian so that you have a cover story for your actions. We absolutely can't let the world know about the Eldorian scroll fragment," ordered Ace with a smile. Nixon nodded his head. "Yes, sir." Ace then looked back at Horace. "Horace! Chapter 388, the TMAA attacks." "Yes, Mr. Garland," shouted Horace. His heart was pounding as he wondered if Ace would kill him after revealing the existence of the Eldorian scroll. "You shall join Nixon in his expedition. If you fail again, I'll be seeing only your head the next time we meet," declared Ace. Horace nodded his head as he trembled with fear. Ace then waved his hand. "You may go." He fell into deep thought after Nixon and the rest had left the hall. He was known as the chairman of the TMAA, but he had a hard time getting the fighters to listen to his orders. And now, an alliance emerged from South Diatoran, almost as if provoking him. He had to obtain the Eldorian scroll fragment hidden and protected by the Stewarts. As long as he unraveled the secret on the scroll, he would soon become the strongest man in all of Diatoran. Meanwhile, Horace and Nixon had left the TMAA headquarters. Horace sheepishly followed behind Nixon and asked, "Mr. Xenos, is it true that the Eldorian scroll exists? You shouldn't be asking so many questions. Just do your job. The lesser you know, the better. We're bound to win with this expedition to South Lake City. But if you ever drag us down, don't blame me for being ruthless with you," replied Nixon. Horace nodded his head repeatedly. All right. Nixon's expression was of contempt. He wouldn't have bothered to bring trash like Horace along, if not for the chairman's orders. Horace stared at Nixon's back while deep in thought. It would seem that the Eldorian scroll has really appeared. The corners of his mouth unconsciously twisted into a grin. The very next day, major news was spread across Diatoran. A fragment of the legendary Eldorian scroll thought to be lost to time was apparently in the hands of the Stewart family. All the traditional martial arts experts within Diatoran were on the move. They gathered and formed various gangs as they made a beeline toward Stewart residence. Everyone had their eyes on the Eldorian scroll fragment. The entirety of Diatoran was on the verge of chaos. I don't know which bastard revealed such top secret information to the public. I'll kill him myself if I find out who it is, shouted Nixon. Nixon was currently leading his men toward South Lake City. Now that the secret about the Eldorian scroll was revealed, their expedition into South Lake City would definitely become a treacherous one. Horace was startled as he watched Nixon express his anger. Horace sheepishly asked, "Mr. Xenos, what should we do now? Should we deal with Caspian first, or should we look for the Eldorian scroll fragment first?" "We don't need to go to South Lake City," answered Nixon. Horace was stunned by his answer. Their mission was to kill Caspian and then retrieve the Eldorian scroll fragment. Not heading to South Lake City would be akin to disobeying orders. The reason Caspian managed to become the leader of the Alliance is because he has the support of both Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion. So long as we exterminate the two groups, Caspian will lose all his backers, explained Nixon. What a clever plan, Mr. Xenos. If we can deal with both Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion first, then Caspian won't have any reinforcements to help him and he'll have to surrender.
Let's go.
We're going to deal with Azure Flames first, shouted Nixon. His men all began rerouting to go after Azure Flames. The base of Azure Flames, which was considered to be a second-rate organization, was at Manti, Azure. Azure Flames had tens of thousands of disciples, but now they had been reduced to a mountain of corpses. "Mr. Stevens, we have to go, or it's going to be too late." Astor felt helpless as he listened to his men telling him to evacuate. He was taken by surprise when the TMAA appeared before him. Astor and his men never had the chance to make any preparations. Within 2 hours, half of Azure Flame's men were already defeated. At this pace, Azure Flames would soon be completely eradicated. If Azure Flames ceased to exist, it would also spell the end for Astor. Now that the TMAA had him in their sights, there was nowhere within Diatoran for him to re-establish himself ever again. Astor was depressed. "Where can we go even if we were to evacuate?" One of the elders spoke up. "Mr. Stevens, we can always go to South Lake City and look for Caspian. We nominated him to be the leader of the Alliance, and he has the responsibility to help us out." Astor frowned in response. Caspian may be the leader of the Alliance, but Astor had never been on good terms with him when he was in Naporia. Astor hated the idea of asking Caspian for help. The elder became nervous as he realized that Astor was hesitating about it. "We can't hesitate anymore, Mr. Stevens. We may still have a chance to live if we go to Caspian and ask for his help any longer, and we might not leave here alive." Blood-curdling screams rang out across the Azure Flames headquarters as their men were killed one after another. "Let's go. We're heading to South Lake City." Astor led the charge as he brought his men to carve through the enemies and escape to South Lake City. A few days later, Skyfeather Pavilion, located hundreds of miles away, was also attacked. Avery looked back at the dilapidated headquarters with tears in her eyes. "You bastards! I'll have you pay for this. Once I manage to reach Mr. Lynch for help, I'll be back for revenge." Avery brought some of her men and fled from Skyfeather Pavilion. The majority of Skyfeather Pavilion's members had met their end as they tried to defend against the onslaught from TMAA. Skyfeather Pavilion suffered heavy losses and was almost exterminated. In less than a week, both Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion were defeated. Everyone was on edge as they realized that something bad was going to happen in Diatoran. However, they could only wonder what could be happening for the TMAA to be going all out. Meanwhile, back at Riverside Villa in South Lake City, Willow passed a letter to Caspian's hands. "Hubby, my great-uncle just sent someone to deliver a letter for you." Caspian was both surprised and confused. "Why is Mr. Stewart Sr. looking for me? Why didn't he just give me a call?" He had only met Xandros the few times he visited the Stewart family estate. Caspian wasn't very close with Xandros, which was why the letter took Caspian by surprise. Willow shook her head. "Who knows? I don't even know what's inside the letter." Even Willow was confused by the letter for Caspian, as Xandros usually looked for her father or herself directly for help. She couldn't understand why Xandros had written a letter to Caspian directly. Caspian didn't think much about it and tore the envelope open to read the letter. His expression gradually sank further and further as he read the letter. Chapter 389, The Entire Country. "What's on the letter, hubby? Did something happen?" asked Willow. Caspian returned the letter to Willow and explained, "It's nothing. Mr. Stewart Sr. invited me to visit the Stewart family estate whenever I'm free to have a talk. Willow read the letter and was confused. This letter doesn't seem all that unusual, but it doesn't even say why he wants you to visit. Caspian shook his head. Who knows? I'll find out when I get there. Suddenly, Caspian's phone started ringing. The call was from Lincoln, who urgently addressed Caspian. Mr. Lynch, bad news. You need to come here as soon as possible. I'll be there. Caspian's expression sank as he turned to Willow. I need to go out for a while, darling. Caspian was certain that Lincoln was in trouble, as he wouldn't be in such a hurry otherwise. Half an hour later, Caspian arrived at Zott Manor. He went into the house to find Lincoln with a sunken expression. What happened? Asked Caspian with a frown. Lincoln seemed serious. Mr. Lynch, tons of traditional martial arts experts have appeared in South Lake City, and all of them are heading toward the Stewart family estate. The Stewart family estate? But why? Lincoln shook his head. I never found out why, but the situation is too abnormal even on the surface. The Stewart family estate was located in a small remote village that had very few visitors. What could a bunch of traditional martial arts experts be doing there all at the same time? Lincoln was utterly confused by the situation. Caspian thought about the abnormal situation for a while and realized that there must be something going on that he didn't know about. Perhaps there was something within the Stewart family estate that all the traditional martial arts experts coveted. Caspian couldn't figure out why, no matter how much he tried. Suddenly, Sylvia rushed over and said, Caspian, Astor and Avery wish to see you. Caspian became even more confused. Astor? And even Avery? He may be the leader of the alliance, but it was simply just a title as he never meddled with their affairs. Something must have happened for the two of them to be looking for him at the same time. Sylvia shook her head and replied, I'm not sure why they're here, but they're both injured. Let them come into the house first. All would be clear once they told Caspian what had happened. 2 minutes later, both Astor and Avery entered Zott Manor. Mr. Lynch, we need your help. Mr. Lynch, you need to help us or we're done for. The two of them prostrated themselves in front of Caspian. Avery was sobbing uncontrollably. What happened for the two of you to be so flustered? Asked Caspian. Astor's lips moved, but he couldn't say anything. He had disliked Caspian for a long time, and now that he had to kneel down and beg Caspian for help, he was at a loss for words. Mr. Lynch, we don't know why, but the TMAA appeared and tried to exterminate both of our organizations. We were both defeated, answered Avery. Tears continued to flow down her face as she thought about all her sisters who were killed in the raid. The men from TMAA arrived and started slaughtering us for no reason. They didn't even give us the chance to talk. Please help us. Mr. Lynch, said Astor. Astor also started crying as he spoke. He had been living with Azure Flame since he was a child, and it had been 20 years since he had become the leader. He couldn't accept the fact that Azure Flames was exterminated within a single day. Caspian's expression sank as he listened to their story. He realized that the TMAA wasn't satisfied with just annoying him back then. This time, they exterminated both Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion in one go. The TMAA had the guts to actually go against the Diaturanian god of war. The TMAA wanted to make an example out of Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion. They wanted to show the world that they were the strongest organization. But their assumptions would soon collapse. Calm down, both of you. The TMAA must think we're easy prey. But don't worry, I'll fight back against them as the leader of the Alliance of South Diatoran and bring them to justice. Once I'm done with them, I'll help you rebuild your homes as well, declared Caspian. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Both Astor's and Avery's faces lit up with joy as they expressed their utmost gratitude with a few deep bows. Caspian then turned to Lincoln. Lincoln, please arrange a place to stay for the two of them and let them rest up. Lincoln nodded his head. Yes, sir. Both Astor and Avery wanted to get back into action and avenge their fallen brothers and sisters. But they were both heavily injured and had just become refugees who could only rely on Caspian. Besides, they wouldn't dare to go against Caspian's orders. Just what is going on? Sylvia, asked Caspian. Lincoln's network of information wasn't as elaborate as Sylvia's. Sylvia had been fighting alongside him for many years and could even utilize the intelligence organization of Diatoran. She could basically uncover all information within the country. I've found out that the TMAA sent out the head elder, Nixon, along with 5,000 of their elites to South Lake City. They're claiming to want to kill you, but they actually have another reason to be here, answered Sylvia. Oh? What are their plans? Asked Caspian. The TMAA suddenly appeared with such an army and even destroyed both Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion. Their actions seemed to suggest that they had other motives aside from dealing with Caspian. Rumors are that one of the Eldorian scroll fragments is currently within the Stewart family estate. The main objective of the TMAA is to retrieve that fragment, answered Sylvia. Sylvia was also shocked when she first learned of this information. The Eldorian scroll had been lost for hundreds of years. Yet, information coincidentally and suddenly resurfaced about one of the fragments being kept by the Stewart family. It was genuinely strange. Caspian's expression sank. A fragment of the Eldorian scroll? He knew about the Eldorian scroll, and he knew more about it than anyone else. That was because Caspian himself was in possession of one of the 9 fragments. It was one of the major reasons why Caspian had managed to become the Diaturanian god of war at such a young age. He got his fragment by chance, and he gained tremendous strength after unraveling the secrets within his fragment. He went on to dominate the battlefield and eventually got to where he was now. Now, another one of the Eldorian scroll fragments was rumored to be within the Stewart family estate. It was no wonder that the TMAA would be so eager to retrieve it. It was no longer just South Lake City, but the entirety of Diatoran that was out for the scroll fragment. Caspian suddenly remembered about the letter written by Xandros. Although the letter never mentioned much, Caspian quickly realized that Xandros knew about the Eldorian scroll fragment. It must be why he had invited Caspian to visit the Stewart family estate. Caspian realized that he would need to personally investigate the matter. Chapter 390 Armored Soldiers. The Eldorian scroll fragment couldn't fall into the hands of people with ill intentions. Caspian, almost every organization has sent their men toward the Stewart family estate to look for the scroll fragment. Should we mobilize the armored soldier? Asked Sylvia. The armored battalion was a team of soldiers personally trained by Caspian himself for special occasions. They were all men of high quality who were much more powerful than the special force members. The Eldorian scroll fragment was something that couldn't afford to fall into the hands of evil. Mobilizing the armored battalion now would ensure that it would be protected. Caspian shook his head and replied, "There's no need for that. The appearance of one of the Eldorian scroll fragments is actually good news. We can publicly announce the existence of the Eldorian scroll to everyone within Diatoran. I'd like to see how many more criminals crawl out of the woodwork. And as they try to go after the scroll, we'll capture all of them in one fell swoop." Caspian's eyes flashed with confidence as he spoke. Even Sylvia was surprised by how calm and collected Caspian was. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of South Lake City, Horace respectfully voiced his opinion to Nixon. "Are we going to look for Caspian yet, Mr. Xenos? Now's a good opportunity to kill him." "There's no need for that. Caspian isn't our target. Our objective now is to secure the Eldorian scroll fragment now that everyone knows about its existence. Besides, we no longer have to pretend that we're going after Caspian," answered Nixon. They had claimed to be going after Caspian, while they were really going after the Eldorian scroll fragment. But now that the scroll's existence was widespread news, they no longer had to hide their true intentions. "Horace, I'm allocating you 1,000 of our elites to go after Caspian, and I'll be bringing the rest with me to the Stewart family estate. Now that both Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion are done for, I'm sure Caspian will quietly surrender. If he dares to resist, kill him on the spot," ordered Nixon. Nixon's words were filled with murderous intent. He was extremely irritated since the secret of the Eldorian scroll fragment had been revealed to the world. Prestigious families from Dord City had sent out their own elites. Even some of the most secluded hermits were out in action just for a chance to acquire the scroll fragment. Nixon felt unprecedented pressure over the situation. Even though the TMAA was strong, they were certainly not invincible. The TMAA didn't dare to directly offend some of the most powerful families in Dord City. Nixon realized that he had to secure the Eldorian scroll fragment as soon as possible. He deemed that dealing with Caspian was a waste of time. He decided to send Horace on his way with 1,000 men to deal with Caspian. Nixon had completely underestimated Caspian. Horace, however, was extremely nervous as he knew about Caspian's true strength. He couldn't even take more than a single hit from Caspian. With such terrifying strength, Caspian belonged in the same ranks as the chairman himself. Horace felt uneasy when Nixon ordered him to go after Caspian again. Mr. Xenos. Nixon was unamused. What is it? Are you thinking of chickening out? Don't forget that you're on a mission to regain your honor. Don't blame me for being ruthless if you dare to disobey me. Horace could only nod in agreement. I won't let you down, Mr. Xenos. You're not allowed to fail this time, Horace, or I'll personally finish you off. Horace was frightened. He could only hope that Azure Flames and Skyfeather Pavilion's defeat had already shocked Caspian to the core. He would then swoop in to capture the surrendered Caspian. Anything else and it would be too much trouble for him to deal with. Meanwhile, at Stewart residence, a shadow suddenly appeared within Marilyn's room. Marilyn was taking a rest when the shadow startled her. Fabian, is that you? You almost scared me to death. Fabian had been acting like a ghost ever since he joined Shadowgate. Marilyn felt that her heart would soon be unable to take on his antics. It wasn't wise for a woman her age to be constantly frightened by shadows. The Eldorian scroll fragment appeared within the Stewart family estate, whispered Fabian. Eldorian scroll? What's that? Some book? Asked Maritim. The light in Fabian's eyes dimmed as he seemed disappointed in Marilyn. He realized he couldn't rely on Marilyn alone for information. Grandma, do we have anything to do with the Stewart family estate? Do you know who Xandros is? Asked Fabian. Of course, I do. Xandros is my son's great uncle, and he's my senior. Why do you ask? Replied Marilyn. Could you write a letter to Xandros and ask him for any information regarding the Eldorian scroll fragment? Xandros was well respected within the Stewart family estate. His appearance would also facilitate Shadowgate's search for the Eldocian scroll fragment. Marilyn agreed without any hesitation. Oh, sure. I'm sure he'd help his Celebs with a book. Meanwhile, back at Zot Manor, a conversation was taking place. This is bad. A large number of traditional martial arts experts have entered the Stewart family estate, said Lincoln. Caspian. Hermits from Dord City have also appeared, reported Sylvia. The situation was worse than they had imagined. News about the Eldorian scroll fragment had caused an uproar within the country. Sylvia, how is the progress on your given task? Asked Caspian. I've finished the preparations, Caspian. I've mobilized a regiment from the South Aridlands and placed them all around the Stewart family estate for an ambush. Those who go in will definitely not be coming out alive. Besides, I've also gathered hundreds of armored soldiers to protect you, replied Sylvia. Traditional martial arts experts couldn't possibly stand a chance against the military with firearms. As for the armored soldiers, their only responsibility was Caspian safety. After all, the Diatoranian god of war was one of the most important people in Diatoran. Lincoln was flabbergasted as he listened to Sylvia's report. He couldn't believe that an entire regiment of soldiers was mobilized for the current situation. He reckoned that even the most powerful fighters would have to surrender when faced with thousands of armed soldiers along with tanks. Caspian nodded his head with satisfaction. Very well. It's time to show them who's boss. Anything I can help, Mr. Lynch? Asked Lincoln. I'm leaving South Lake City to your hands once we leave for the Stewart family estate. I'll hold you responsible if anything happens here, replied Caspian. Lincoln nodded his head. Yes, sir. He had also wanted to go to the Stewart family estate. But then again, he wouldn't possibly disobey Caspian's orders. Suddenly, a loud boom rang out from outside the house. It was immediately followed by a barrage of other noises. Caspian frowned as he realized that something had gone wrong, again. Lincoln angrily shouted, Bastards! Who dares to cause trouble here? Trouble kept knocking on the door of Zot Manor, and they were never given a moment's peace.